Good evening, everyone. Well, here you are again, meeting in your small groups, and as usual, I like to affirm you for doing that. As you know, we have a conviction that life change often happens best in the context of a small group. And that life change could be significant for you tonight as we look at Joshua chapter 3 and Joshua chapter 4 in the crossing of the Jordan River, that story of the children of Israel led by Joshua. It's a fascinating story, and you're going to be reading it together again this evening. But anytime I read about the Jordan River or think about the Jordan River, I've got some warm thoughts personally because I had the privilege of being baptized in the Jordan River when I was in my early 20s. I was there on a trip with my father, and my father and I waded into that muddy, polluted river, and he put me under, and it was a memorable time for me, just knowing that so many important aspects of the Bible were accomplished in or around the Jordan River. Certainly the baptism of Jesus, but then we've got this story here of the children of Israel crossing over the Jordan River, ready to take possession of what God had promised to them. So wonderful symbolism here that you'll be thinking through this evening in your discussion. Just a word about this as well, that periodically we'll be coming back to the book of Joshua. There are a lot of great standalone chapters and concepts and principles in the book of Joshua, and because we need to be reminded to be courageous often, we're going to come back to this book over and over again over the next number of years so that we can highlight some of these things. But in particular, you're going to be looking at Joshua 3 and 4 again this evening. And I want you to focus on a few things that some of the questions that you have in your outline there. Just want to point out something here to you from Joshua 3 verse 5. Before they were going to cross the river, Joshua said to the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." And I think the Lord always wants to do amazing things among us as His people, but it often requires us consecrating ourselves or dedicating ourselves or really making sure that we are in a right relationship with God and there's no hindrances between us and Him. When we're in that kind of posture, I think then we see God do some interesting things. But you're going to be examining some of these interesting thoughts and questions here about the fact that miracles don't often happen in our lives until we actually step into the river. And you might need to be thinking about certain aspects of faith that God might be calling you to, where you need to step into that as opposed to stepping away from that. In my message too, I talked a little bit about memorials. And boy, that's a fascinating subject, and you might want to do some more thinking about that. But a memorial is some kind of structure that helps us remember what God has done. And just in thinking about that, probably for you as a family, there are many times when God has intervened into your family life, and how important it would be for you to erect some kind of memorial, some kind of structure or picture or photo or object that will remind you and your family of God's faithfulness. But again, in thinking of memorials for us as a church family, I would really challenge you to be creative and think of the lessons of faith that we have had to learn as a church. Think of the experiences where we have stepped out in faith as a congregation and God has come through and done some remarkable things among us. And maybe for you creative types, you could be thinking of some way we could commemorate that as a church family so that might bolster our faith even more so for the future that God might have for us. Most importantly, though, for us personally, let's all wrestle with that question. Where am I stepping out in faith to the extent that if God doesn't come through, I'm sunk? Because that's what real faith is. Not allowing a contingency plan, not having a backup plan or plan B, but just really stepping out in faith as to what we feel God is calling us to. That's when the Christian life becomes really exciting. So I'm glad you have this opportunity to chat about these things tonight, and we'll be prayerful for you that God will really make these things clear as you study and pray together.